One issue I want to address right away on this car is the wheel gap. Well, the plan is to definitely upgrade the suspension. We're going to go with coilovers on this car. But as you probably know, the cool thing about Corvettes is that you can adjust the ride height slightly with the factory bolt. I don't mind a little bit of rake on the stance of a car, so the rear wheel gap isn't all that bad, but the front needs to be addressed immediately. We'll start with just the fronts for now. Take a quick measurement so you have an idea of what we're looking at, but it can definitely come down another inch or so. About 27.5, just shy of 27.5. Admittedly, this measurement isn't super accurate because the car's been in the air for quite some time now and I just set it down. I haven't driven it around or anything, so the suspension hasn't settled. But you can definitely see in the photos of this car that the wheel gap in the front is pretty substantial. The back doesn't sit all that bad, but we'll just have a little bit of rake now if I can get even just a half an inch or so of adjustment in the front. Surprisingly, the other side is exactly the same, so I'm just gonna get her in the air and make some adjustments. Oh, UPS is here, that's great. We're taking her all the way up to the full height for this project. Give us a lot of clearance under the car. You can adjust the rear lowering bolts with the wheels on still, but for adjusting the fronts, you do have to take the wheels off. How these quick jacks make jobs like this so much more convenient. Links in the description below to these guys. If you work on a Corvette or low cars, all these quick jacks are well worth the money. Now with the car up in this position, we have easy access to the lowering bolts, which you can see right there. I knew this project was coming up, so I had soaked them in some WD-40 over the last couple of weeks. Looking at this now though, there is a lot of threads exposed. This may be lowered all the further it can go. Kind of get a glimpse here of the bushing too on the underside of the leaf spring. It's in rough shape. Good thing we're going to be upgrading the suspension here soon. For the purpose of completing the task for this video, I'm going to go ahead and walk through the process for you. And we'll see if we can lower the car anymore. It doesn't look like we have much adjustment left, but we'll try it nonetheless. So what you need to do is slide a floor jack under the car and raise it up underneath the leaf spring. You want to relieve a little bit of the pressure that's on that spring. That'll allow you to turn the bolt much easier. Definitely don't want to go too crazy with the jack because the car is up on the stand, so you don't want to tip it backwards. So just a little bit of pressure underneath that leaf spring to relieve that tension is all you need. So now you're at this point, you have the jack underneath the leaf spring. You've relieved a little bit of that pressure by raising the jack up just ever so slightly. You'll take a 10mm wrench or socket, whatever you can fit in here. But this bolt should turn relatively easily counterclockwise, so to the left. And you want to just make sure you've taken before measurements and after measurements. But once you get to a point, right now we've bottomed out on that bolt, so we can't adjust it anymore. So now what I would do is, to ensure that both sides are the same, you could measure or count the number of threads, but an easy way to do it is take a tape measure and measure here, and then you compare it to the other side. That way you know you've got the same number of threads with the same amount of bolt exposed. So you could think of it this way. It's counterclockwise from above where we are, but if you were under the car making this adjustment, you would be essentially tightening this bolt, pulling this leaf spring down closer to the A-arm, which would be essentially raising this A-arm and closing the wheel gap, right? So pretty easy to conceptualize, to visualize what's going on here. So again, just repeat this process on the other side and you're good to go. In my case, unfortunately, the bolt was already bottomed out, so there was no adjustment left in this car. So unfortunately, for the time being, the car is going to sit exactly how it was. I simply rotated the bolt the other direction just to show you how it would turn for purposes of this video. So I think you get the idea. It's a relatively simple process. The rears are very similar. So you can see you can access the lowering bolts for the rears relatively simply from under the car to the back side. It's very similar in terms of adjustment process. This time though, you just have to make sure you hold the bolt and you rotate the nut from the top. The rears are almost the opposite though, because you can see the leaf spring is under the control arm rather than above. So you're going to be wanting to create distance between the arm and the leaf spring. So what you'd have to do is loosen the nut up here. And again, you can see there is not much adjustment left in my case because there's only so many threads on the top of that nut. So you'd be loosening the nut toward the top. and that would be creating the separation between the arm and the leaf spring, pushing the control arm up, closing your wheel gap above. Now, of course, when you set the car back down, you want to make sure you drive around a little bit, give the suspension a little bit of time to settle and get it to its final resting place before you take comparison measurements. Now guys, if you're thinking about taking on this project yourself and you're looking at this car and comparing it to yours, keep this in mind. The rear wheels are 18s, the fronts are 17s. Rear tires are 275 40 18s, and the fronts are 245 45 17. Now if you have an 18-inch wheel square setup, for example, your fitment might look a little bit different after adjusting your lowering bolts. If you have 19s or 20s, it's going to look dramatically different because obviously it's taking up more of the wheel well just by the wheel and tire combination itself. And that, guys, has to be one of the more simple projects you can do to your C5 Corvette, but it does make a big difference. Obviously the stance of the car really is what makes it or breaks it, in my opinion. Of course, as always, guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I get to every single one of them as quickly as I possibly can. If you're interested in anything you see in these videos, of course, always check the description. I try to link any kind of important product or tool or piece of equipment that I use, just because people inevitably ask the question. Again, check the description for any links to anything you might be interested in. Thank you guys very much for watching. We got a lot of stuff coming through the C5 Corvette, so I hope you stick around. Subscribe if you haven't already. A lot of videos uploaded already at this point and more to come, I can promise you that. Thanks again for watching this one. See you in the next one.